Long live the Empire. Or at least that's what I think Darth Vader said in the movie Star Wars. If you remember the movie Star Wars, Darth Vader and the Emperor were going around and taking over star systems and planets, mainly for two reasons. One, they wanted power, and two, they wanted resources to gain more power. And so this movie is based on some real-life activities or history in our past. If you look at the Roman Empire, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the British, the French, the Spanish, the Americans, was there ever an empire of the United States? Well, today we're going to try and answer the question, how did the United States become an imperialistic power? Now we're going to start by going over some things that we've already learned. First, if you remember, the United States had this idea of manifest destiny. They wanted to move from the east to the west and take over the unclaimed land for their own selfish reasons. Obviously for themselves and to gain resources and to have a little more power. And so this idea was instilled in the American ideal. And at the end around the 1900s, we ran out of room. We'd hit California. There was no place else to expand to. But this idea remained in our mind. And we didn't really have an opportunity to act on that until the end of the Spanish-American War. At the end of the war, Spain came to us with a treaty to end the war called the Treaty of Paris. And in that treaty, we would get a couple of island nations. If you look at the map here, we would get Cuba, we would get Puerto Rico, we would get a little island nation in the Pacific called Guam, and a very large island nation in the Pacific, Philippines. And this was very enticing to many Americans who had that idea in their head. And so the Treaty of Paris sparked this huge debate. Should we approve the treaty and become an imperial power, or do we figure out some other way to officially end the war? And so out of this we have an argument going between the imperialists who wanted the treaty and the anti-imperialists who didn't. Now I associate the imperialists with a very famous character known as the Cookie Monster. Now the Cookie Monster wants one thing. He wants to eat cookies. And if you think about it, imperialists are very similar in the way that they just want power. They want land to get the resources to continue that power. On the other end of it, the anti-imperialists are more like Big Bird. You know, Big Bird is just this friendly guy who wants everyone to get along and everything to be okay. And that's really what the anti-imperialists were going for. Now let's take a look at the argument. What did the anti-imperialists say? Well, they said, number one, if you look at these island nations, they're going to give us a really good access to get over to China and all the Asian markets that we haven't really had a chance to get to. We can refuel our boats at these stations along the way. So that's great there. Trade will expand. Two, the location obviously is perfect for that. Another one is, you know, the United States was really becoming in their own, and they wanted to become a world power up there with Great Britain and Spain and France. And really, at the time, in order to become one of the big guys, you had to have some of your own little colonies. It's kind of like the initiation into a gang. You know, you've got to get to a certain thing in order to be accepted in the gang. We wanted to be in the gang of world powers. So, in order to do that, we needed some territories or some colonies. The other idea is the imperialists argue that we wanted to help the people in these nations that had been taken over by the Spanish for so long. We're going to give them education. We're going to give them the ideals of being a self-governing nation and all of that good stuff that goes along with it. Now, that's their argument. What did the anti-imperialists say? Well, the big birds, they said, you know, if we approve this treaty and become an imperialistic nation, we're going against everything the United States and the Constitution stand for. You know, we broke away from an empire to get our independence. Now we're becoming an empire and taking the independence away from others. And really, that's the main idea that they stood for. They said, you know, we're going against everything that we stand for. Now, it all kind of came down to who was who. On this side, the Cookie Monsters, you had people like Theodore Roosevelt and William McKinley, who were president and vice president at the time. On the other side, you had people like Mark Twain, famous writer, Andrew Carnegie, famous businessman. And so who do you think is going to win out this argument? Well, unfortunately for the anti-imperialists, the imperialists won. So where does that leave us? Well, most of these island nations didn't want to be ruled by another imperial power, so we had some problems there. Cuba didn't want us to go there. Now, if you remember from a couple days ago, we talked about the Teller Amendment. Before the war started with Spain, we said to Cuba, if we win, We'll leave you alone. You'll get your independence. Well, now that we had them through the treaty, we changed our mind. Eventually, after 4 years, we gave them their independence, but we also instituted something into their constitution. And this, of course, is a regent's moment. They instituted the Platt Amendment. And the Platt Amendment said, we can still kind of, get into your government and tell you to do some things, and we have the ability to lease out land in Cuba if we want to, for military bases and so forth. And as a result of that, we ended up getting control of Guantanamo Bay. Now, it's still in existence today. It's a U.S. base on Cuban soil. So we did get a little piece of that pie. If Puerto Rico and Guam, they didn't have the ability or the will to fight us, and so they kind of went along with us. They signed treaties with us to name themselves protectorates of the United States, and they remain that way today. If you're born in either one of these nations, you are a citizen of the United States, and they kind of fall under the umbrella of the United States protection. Now, the Philippines was another story. They really didn't want to be ruled by another imperialistic power, and so they decided to fight us in a war. And the United States really wanted the Philippines at this point, so we were willing to fight that war. And it went on for 3 years. And as a result, about 4,000 Americans died, and about 250,000 Filipinos died. So it was a very bloody battle. It ended up with the Filipinos surrendering to us, and we ended up holding on to the Philippines until 1946. And we also put a little thing in their constitution, like the Platt Amendment, where we were allowed to have military bases there. And we did create 2 military bases there and held on to them until 1992. So really, we ended up getting what we wanted and securing our foothold across the entire world.